One. All right, and we're live. All right, guys, I'm here with Connor Evans, Australian Commonwealth Games representative, national team coach, and current head wrestling coach at Absolute MMA in Melbourne. Connor, thanks for joining me today, bro.
No, no problem. Happy to be on.
Awesome, brother. Now, it's actually funny. We were together. I was training with you about 10 years ago at Invictus. So it's been a little while since
Yeah.
then. But you were one of the first wrestling coaches in Australia. You're originally from, was it Scotland?
Yeah, Scotland. Yeah.
Yeah, you're originally from Scotland. So talk to me about a bit about how you got started into wrestling.
Yep.
Your sort of journey from, when you started to then coming to Australia to start coaching and how that all sort of happened.
Yep. So I started wrestling when I was about 6 years old, I think it was.
Hmm.
Um, Back then I was into WWE, and I think my mum or dad saw like a local ad in the newspaper for our local team, and I thought I was getting into like WWE. I thought I was gonna be like the next Undertaker or something like that. And got to the class and was spewing because there was no ring and no top rope that I could jump off. And then dad's like, "Oh, we're here now, might as well try it." And then just been hooked ever since. So um, kind of made my first international relatively young. I think I was about 11 or 12 when I started competing internationally. And then just traveled a bit with the Scottish and British teams, got a lot of exposure in Europe, which was really, really good. And then when I was 16, family decided to move to Australia. I just fancied a bit of a change and better quality of life. So came here in 2009. Um, I started competing in Australia in 2012, I think it was. I took a few years off just to kind of finish school and get a job and all that sort of stuff. And then 2013 started competing again for the national team, and then since then the rest is history. So I've been, I think I won national championships 6 times, and then since then I've kind of retired from competition and went more into the coaching side. And for the last year was the national team coach for Australia.
Wow, that's quite a journey there. So I mean, you originally wanted to be the next Undertaker, and
Yeah,
then you realized it was freestyle wrestling instead of
yeah.
performance wrestling. Oh, that's crazy. Um, so when you um when you became a coach, did you notice a sort of difference in the way that you had to? I mean, so sorry, when I was at Invictus, when was that? When did you start there? Because I remember you just started
Yeah.
then.
So it would have been 2015. I was at Invictus, and that's when I kind
Yeah.
of started coaching in general.
Yeah, that would have been 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how like what are the differences that you sort of had to learn while coaching? And I mean,
Yeah.
now you've come all the way into coaching MMA, but I guess like what were the
Yeah.
sort of differences you noticed from competing to coaching, and how was that transition for you?
I think learning to explain how to do something is it's a skill in
Mm.
itself. So there was stuff that I've done since a young age when I was wrestling, and to me it was just second nature, and I never really thought about why it worked or why it didn't work or all that sort of stuff. And it wasn't until I started
Hmm.
coaching where I'd be like, all right, do this, this, and this, and people would get stuck at certain points, and I have to work out new ways to explain to them, like, oh, how to move your body in a specific way, or where you should be feeling some pressure, like different things that just to me I didn't have to think about. Like so, rewording and trying to coach people to teach my style of wrestling, like that was a big learning curve for me. But the good thing with that, it helped me develop a better understanding of the technique that I was using at the time. So while I was coaching in 2015 through to about 2019, 2020, I was still competing myself. And just by gaining that deeper understanding, it helped me develop a bit as a wrestler as well. So even when I was competing, the coaching did help me kind of look at things from a new perspective, and it opened up a bunch of different possibilities for me to learn how I can adapt as a wrestler as well. So like it worked really well on both fronts. Like helped my understanding, but also helped me bring other people into the sport. Obviously in Australia, it's not a very mainstream sport. So like just to get
Mm.
more people involved and kind of grow that exposure was a big part of like why I do what I do.
Yeah, for sure, bro. And I I was gonna ask, that was my follow-up question, is that learning the coaching aspect and how to explain things makes you a better athlete.
Yeah.
and it's a bit crazy how that works. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I noticed the same thing when I started coaching boxing and kickboxing as well, and I think it definitely can take your game to the next level. But
yeah,
like you said, wrestling's not very big in Australia at all. I think there was like no wrestling clubs, and now like MMA is sort of starting to
yeah,
become quite mainstream as well. And
yeah,
yeah, like you were like one of the first wrestling coaches that
mm,
I even heard of
yeah,
in Australia. So how has that development been? Like obviously it's come quite a long way since
yeah,
I guess 2015 when you started coaching.
yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
what do you think about how far the sport has come and where it's going as well in the future? Like I think there's
Yeah,
great things in the future for Aussie wrestling.
yeah, definitely. Like we don't get me wrong. Like we've got a long way to go. We've got
Hmm.
a big gap to make up to catch up with like the elite wrestling countries in the world. I think the biggest reason for that is participation. Like if you go to Russia or the States or a lot of places in Asia, there's like career pathways. They learn it in school, all that sort of stuff. So there's just more avenues to compete and train in the bigger wrestling nations. I think for us to be competitive, we really need some kind of mainstream exposure. So having MMA, uh, the popularity of MMA getting big over the last 10, 15 years has gave us a lot more exposure that we never would have had 10, 15 years ago. To the point where myself and like one or two other coaches now coach wrestling as their full-time jobs. Up until the last maybe 4 or 5 years, that was just never an option. So even to give to like younger kids coming through and say like, oh look, if you stick at this, you might make a Commonwealth Games, you might make an Olympics, and then following that, you can then make a career as a coach and earn a living and like support yourself, your family through wrestling. I think that's one of the best ways we can kind of try and really grow that exposure and get people involved.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, you have to get the participation and also the coaches, giving them enough resources, I guess, to be able to even sustain that way of life, I guess. Um, so yeah, definitely important as the sport grows and more people become part of it. It's able to be sustainable for coaches as well. Um, but I mean, you deserve to be able to do that full time. I mean, you've been at it for so long now. Like it's so that's good. Um, you talked about international wrestling and the USA and Russia. Have you yourself sort of studied them? Obviously, you've studied them from home, but have you ever worked, like, what are some of the people or coaches you've worked with personally that have
Yeah.
just been able to take your game to the next level type of
Yeah.
thing?
I think I've been pretty lucky because I did start competing internationally at a young age. It gave me a bit of a leg up in terms of experience competition because I could travel to Europe, do training camps
Mm.
in Europe because I was living in Scotland at the time, so it's relatively cheap to fly. It's not like a big time difference
Yeah.
as well. So it was quite accessible for me. I was just fortunate enough where my parents were able to support me and like allow me to go and travel internationally to get better. Um, and I've lost count the amount of like really influential coaches and wrestlers that I've been able to train with. Like I've been really, really fortunate. To kind of give you an example, in the lead up to the 2020 Olympics, we had Alexander Leopold, who was the Sydney 2000 gold medalist at 74. Oh, sorry, gold or silver? He won a medal at the
Yeah, I'm
Olympics.
here. Yeah.
He won it. He won it. Sorry. And
Hmm.
just through connections with one of the other wrestlers who had trained in Germany previously, we actually managed to bring him out for like 3 months worth of training camps in the lead up to the 2020 Olympic trials. So even just having access to people like that who are legitimately like some of the best in the world. He was the German national team coach at that point as well. Just getting insight from people like that is huge, and you don't realize just how small the wrestling community is. Like even on a global scale, it's very
Mm.
easy to go and train when you're like some of these really elite guys and just kind of pick their brains and see um, what it is that makes them good. And the coaches are generally speaking like quite open to be like, oh, you can improve on this, and here's how we done this, or even in terms of like the structure of their organizations and like how they do things in America or versus how they do it in Russia or China or Japan or wherever it is. Like most, I guess as well because Australia is not really seen as a threat because we're not like a big powerhouse country in wrestling. I think most people are open to hosting us and be like, oh, look, you guys can come, we'll teach you some stuff. You can take it home, then try and catch up to us later on. So it's pretty cool the opportunities
Mm.
you get just by being involved in the sport.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, having that sort of level of skill and being able to learn from that is invaluable. And how important, like, I don't know how the structure is, but like you were competing yourself up until till recently, right? So
Yep.
you've stopped competing now.
Yep.
But when you are in that competition, how important is it to have those guys around that are gonna take it to the next level? And how do you get that in Australia where there might not be, like, you can't, maybe you're not always flying guys out and stuff like that. But yeah, just talk to me about how important you think it is to have world-class training partners and coaches around you as a wrestler or MMA or whatever.
Yeah. Like it definitely goes without saying, like wrestling's an individual sport, but like you definitely need like a really strong support team around you. Like even not necessarily in terms of like even training partners and coaches, like off the mat, my family were always massively supportive. I think that's the biggest thing you need.
Mm.
Because when you're in that high stage of competition, like you're spending a lot of time not getting to see them, not getting to hang out with the people you love and want to spend time with. It's like it can be quite lonely at times, but just knowing they got your back, like I think that's a big um a big thing that always helped me mentally. As well as that, like when I was preparing for Olympics and Commonwealth Games, I had a psychologist that I would speak to regularly, I had a nutritionist. I was always in contact with the national coaches. I was quite fortunate that when I was competing, the national coach was my club coach, so like I had a really good relationship, and it always worked really, really well for me. The hardest thing for me was finding training partners in Australia. We have got good wrestlers here, but to to get to the level where you're competing against the guys that I was competing against, like it was very, very hard because like it's really once you get to the top of the tree in Australia, you kind of hit the roof a little bit. So it used to be a case of I would travel to Sydney a lot to train with my mate Jaden. So he competed in the Olympics just gone.
Hmm.
And because we were two of the better wrestlers, roughly the same size, same age, it just made sense. And we were like one weight class separate. It just made sense that every time there's a major comp coming up, we'd get together for a month. Either he would come here or I'd go there. And we just try and get a couple of weeks worth of training and just get that like match sharpness back. Um, but like I think we were generally pretty lucky. Like both of us had like really good coaches that we could always rely on to kind of give us the technical advice we need. Even if we weren't in the same room as them, I could go back to them and they'd give me feedback. I'd show them videos and they'd be like, "Oh, you done really well here," or "That was terrible. We need to fix this up." And then it's something that we can brush up on. Um, but yeah, like having good people around you, it's impossible to do it yourself. Like you definitely need that support role from like your family, your coaches, your training partners, your mates. Like just having them understand why you do what you do and giving you 100% support. Like that made all the difference for me.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that, with the support aspect. Like a lot of younger guys maybe ask what's one of the most important things for success. And honestly, if based off what I've seen, the most important thing is that you have support in the form of, it could be family or it could be sponsors and all of that. Like that's one of the most important aspects. If you don't have that, then you have to, like, if you don't have sponsors, for example, you probably have to go work a job,
Yeah,
and then you can't dedicate as much time training. So support is 100%,
yeah,
I think, one of the most important things.
yeah,
Um, Now, you mentioned training with who was it? Jaden.
yeah,
Sorry, I
yeah.
didn't catch the
Jordan
name.
Moran. Yeah,
Yeah. And do you find when you're like, I guess with someone who's at a high level as well, that you know that's the way you level up? Do you find yourself
yeah,
like experimenting with different techniques as
yeah,
well, maybe, and like just sort of cooking up,
yeah.
inventing different things, and yeah, like sort of do you find yourself doing that and experimenting with different things, or do you just try and nail the basics
I
still?
think it's a bit of both, to be honest. Like when you're, or for me, when I was wrestling someone who is my level or better, like I know I'd have to be at my best. They always keep you on your toes. Like your fundamentals, your basics had to be locked in. Like you can't ignore that. But at the same time, you to catch them off guard, like you have to have a bit of creativity. Like, you can't just go hit the same technique five, six, seven times and expect it to work every time. You have to like find a way to get them off base. Like, you can't just expect the same stuff to work over and over and over. I think that's where like a lot I notice it a lot with like early stage amateur MMA guys. It's like they'll have excellent striking and they'll go in and they'll like go on a tear with two or three fights and just like take people's heads off. And it's like, oh, cool, I'm a good striker. I can make this MMA work for me. And they completely ignore their grappling. Or they're really good at wrestling and they'll all they do is like take people down and grind out a result. And it's like it's pretty boring to watch. They never really do that much damage in the fights. It's like, oh, cool, I've won 3 or 4 fights in a row. But then as they start getting up and you're looking at like amateur belts or like turning pro and like going into your professional career and that, you find the guys who just grinded all the different disciplines at the start, they're the ones that it might take them a little bit longer, but they rise to the top eventually and they'll be so much more well rounded when they become professionals. Whereas like the guys who are quite one dimensional, it's like, yeah, for at the early age of your amateur career, like you might be like miles ahead of people just because you're so far ahead in one field. But like by the time you turn pro, it's really going to start catching up. So like um you look at the best guys in the UFC, and like it's very hard to find like one-dimensional fighters anymore.
Mm.
Everybody knows how to strike. Everybody can wrestle. Everybody's jiu-jitsu is at a good level. Like you can't just be that. Like back to early days of the UFC when it was just like if you had wrestling and dirty boxing, you got a good chance of winning. Whereas like now it's like nah, you have to be almost a bit an expert in just about everything that you do. Like, and that goes with like strength and
Mm.
conditioning, nutrition, like all that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, um I wanted to touch on that as well because I mean what you just said is perfect. That now the level of, especially in MMA, the level of skill is getting so like
Yeah,
so much higher just as the sport, because it's a pretty new sport, and the more it evolves, the more well-rounded guys you're getting from a young age. Like I don't know, I've seen a lot of videos from the UK where there's like young like 12-year-old like
yeah,
kids, and they're like, boxing champion, jiu-jitsu champion,
yeah,
wrestling champion, and it's like just the way the sport is evolving is crazy. And I mean, I want to talk about the evolution next, but I want to ask you because before you mentioned about when you were competing, you had your mindset coach, you had your nutrition, strength and conditioning, and all the different things. So, talk to me a little bit about how you structure, or how you used to structure your own coaches and your team of like the professionals around you,
yeah,
and how you advise your own students to structure their training. Maybe they want to be pro, or maybe they're already pro. Um, because yeah, I think back in the days, a long time ago, if you're a boxer or a wrestler, your coach, your technique coach was your strength
yeah,
coach and your nutritionist and everything. But now,
yeah,
obviously, talking about that evolution, you're kind of delegating more specific
yeah,
roles to specific individuals. So yeah, talk to me a little bit about your team and how you structure that.
yeah. Um, I guess I'd start by saying like I was lucky where I had the means where I could have that team around me. Like not everybody's going to have that from the start. So like you're saying, like if your only resource is your technique coach and you didn't be your S&C coach, your nutritionist, whatever else it is, like that's fine. Like especially at a beginner level, like if it's someone that's competed themselves and they've got a relatively good idea of the sport, then it's always a good resource regardless of what you're asking them. So if you're unsure, I would say like first step should always be your head coach. Like you go to for advice for whatever you need. Um, and again, for me, I was very lucky where because the level I was competing at, um, I kind of attracted good quality people that were willing to work with me and like help me out just based off the fact that I was competing at a high level. So, um, my I guess the one thing I would say is like I used a psychologist, a PT, a nutritionist, all that sort of stuff. But that would always revolve around my on the mat time. So like the first priority should always be if you're boxing, how long you spend in the ring. If you're wrestling, how long you spend in the mat. If it's MMA, how long you spend, like whatever it is doing what you're doing. Um, and I would say if you're serious about taking your sport to like the next level, I reckon like 5 days a week, twice a day, 2 hours a day, you're training your sport. You'd have a half day a week, sorry, one half day during the week where you do one session but a lighter intensity. and then a full rest day, and it'd be either a Saturday or Sunday where I would take my rest day, and then
Yeah.
all the other stuff is supplementary. So like my strength and conditioning, I would fit that in around my core wrestling schedules, and my that was one of the first things my PT said to me. So my PT, he was working at the VIS at the time, and I was with him for probably a year and a half, 2 years. And he was like, "Yep, cool." Cause at that point I was jumping up weight classes as well. So he's like, "Yep, you want to gain weight? We can do all these lifts, we can sort your nutrition out, but the main focus is still wrestling." He's like, "We can try and fit three S and C sections in a week, as long as it doesn't impact like your core training, which is your time on the mat wrestling." And he's like, "We might vary the intensity of your wrestling sessions depending on what lifts you're doing or what cardio is on the go for that week, but you still have to hit all those core sessions regardless of what's happening, like with all your supplementary stuff, so like your S and C and all that." And I think that's where a lot, especially younger guys, you kind of see looking for shortcuts nowadays. Where it's like,
Mm.
all right, cool, I want to be an MMA fighter, but I'm also going to spend like 5 days at the gym lifting for half an hour as opposed to training MMA. And it's like, yeah, cool, you look jacked, but like it's not functional strength. It's not what you need to be successful in your sport. So it's to me, and I don't mean like bad talk anyone, but like it's kind of like ego lifting for the sake of like, oh, I'm going to be fighting in a cage, so I want to look jacked. And it's like, nah, you train for functional strength, train for stuff that's going to get you the results you want in the cage, not results you want by like how you look, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
that was always a big focus for my training. It's like as long as I can like the on the mat sessions that I've got, as long as I don't feel absolutely drained at the every single on the mat session, I know my cardio, my strength and conditioning is my nutrition's probably at a level that it should be close to. Maybe not perfect, but like relatively good to where I'm doing like 14 sessions. No, sorry, not 14. Probably like 10 like hard training sessions a week on the mat and not feeling like I'm getting injured, not feeling tired, not feeling sluggish, all the rest of it. Like as long as I know in my head that I've checked all those boxes, then I'm quite happy at that.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, like you said, I do find that maybe with a lot of younger guys as well, they're trying to do, I guess it's the easy work
Yeah,
over the hard work, you know? The easy work is going and just doing some reps on the in the gym,
yeah,
but the hard work is trying to learn your craft, you know? Like that hurts your ego. Some days you go to sparring, you get bashed, you go to the mat, you get thrown around, you know, and that's like the hard work. It's good for your ego to go lift in the gym. It doesn't
yeah,
really, you know, upset you. So yeah, I agree with you where you can sometimes find a maybe less experienced guys or they're trying to control the things that are easier to control, I
yeah,
guess, you know,
yeah, definitely.
with the strength conditioning. But yeah, definitely um prioritizing your skill development is very important.
Yeah,
And with when we're talking about skill development, I wanna get your opinion on how you go about developing skill. And as I said, we'll talk about your transition to sort of MMA coaching
yeah,
next up. But I want to talk about how you go about developing skill, you know, especially because in wrestling, I feel like with wrestling, it's a lot harder to get the reps in because
mm,
it's a lot more intense.
yeah,
Like for if you're boxing, you can throw 1,000 jabs in a day
yeah,
and you might have a sore shoulder. But if you do 1,000 single legs or double legs, like you're gonna get banged up, you
yeah,
know? So how do you best approach developing skill, I guess from a level of zero,
yeah,
and the progression of that?
yeah. Um, I think like honestly, one of the big parts that's probably ignored a bit is like how physically capable you are as a person. You know what I mean? Like, say for example, you grew up in Victoria playing AFL. You're relatively fit, strong, quite athletic, or versus somebody who grew up playing video games their entire life and never really got out of the house, maybe a little bit chubby and like just don't have that same kind of athleticism. So like, I think you need to assess where people are physically at before you even think about like skill development. So like, say for example, as somebody who's quite athletic, ready to go off the bat, um, I just start with like real fundamental stuff. So it's like you say, like throwing your jab in boxing. Like if you got a good jab, like it kind of sets your range. Like you set up the rest of your combos off your jab, all that sort of stuff. Same sort of thing goes with wrestling. Like a solid wrestling stance, a good sprawl, and a good leg attack entry can actually take you a long way. So like, even without getting too deep into technique, nailing those kind of two or three fundamental skills, um, and then building your game plan around that based off what you feel works for you. So yeah, it might be like, all right, cool. I can only finish like a double leg, like, and I need to get reps in a double leg. It's like, well, how do you then set your double leg up? Are we working lots of fakes and snaps? Are we working arm drags? Like, how can you best get someone to a position where you feel ready to take that shot? And once you take that shot, we're probably like 80% confident you'll get the finish. So I think a big part of wrestling that's ignored a lot is just how you set things up. And again, if you got those fundamental skills nailed to the point where it's like you don't have to think about what you're doing. So if someone shoots on you, you're going to sprawl. If you see an opening, you can shoot without even thinking about it, and your stance is always perfect. All you have to do is find two or three setups to get an entry yourself, and you give yourself a really, really good chance to become a decent level wrestler pretty quickly.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting what you just said, and I think it sums it up really well. But like I noticed when like obviously my wrestling's like not there. Like I've never competed or anything like that, but I've dabbled in some grappling.
Yeah,
But I realized how physically hard it is and how much athleticism is required. Like I feel like in some striking as well, coming from a striker, you can maybe like you don't have to use as much physicality and you can kind of sort of maneuver your way
yeah,
around that, I guess. But I mean, wrestling's like head to head, bang. You have to be explosive. You have to be athletic.
mm,
So yeah, I think that plays a part in wrestling more than some other combat sports, in my opinion. And like with what you said, you have to assess where the person is, and that athletic base definitely helps because wrestling is such an athletic sport,
yeah,
maybe compared to other combat sports.
yeah,
Um, so and also with your setups, if you're setting up a takedown, like I noticed that as well when I um was training some wrestling, that it's like, I mean, it's not that difficult. Obviously your entry is important, of course, but it's not the most difficult part isn't grabbing the leg. It's
yeah,
getting to the leg in the first
yeah,
place.
absolutely.
So yeah, having those setups, um I think is like, yeah, like you said, that's like, you know, gonna be your base for developing
Yeah,
your game. Now, so you started off with the wrestling, but you started off wrestling coaching at an
yeah,
MMA gym.
yeah,
Um, Talk to me about, did you start like did you go straight into cornering MMA, or like how was your transition from coaching wrestling to now sort of, I guess you're into you coach MMA as well,
yeah,
or
yeah,
you're at an MMA gym.
yeah,
So how what sort of differences have you noticed, I guess, in the way that you approach wrestling for MMA
yeah.
and coaching?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was realizing that like when it came to striking and jiu-jitsu, I had to kind of put my ego at the side and be like, all right, look, in this specific scenario, wrestling is pretty useless. So say for example, um, I want to shoot a double leg on you and we're doing MMA. If you're striking and you're keeping me in kicking range and just like kicking me non-stop, it's going to be hard for me to close that distance and get a takedown. So just understanding like the basics of striking where I could close the distance and feel like I could get a shot away without eating a couple of punches on the way in. And realizing that, like similar to what I was saying with like skill development for wrestlers, like learning how to set the shot up was a complete learning experience for me because when I started coaching in MMA gyms, I had zero striking experience and I had zero Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu experience as well. So, um, as I say, understanding what parts of wrestling firstly are applicable because like not everything we do in wrestling is transferable to MMA. There's way more variables in MMA, like getting punched in the face changes things. As well
Hmm.
as that, the stance is much more upright. So again, I'm not going to get the same reaction in an MMA fight that I'm in a wrestling match for certain setups. So yeah, biggest thing for me was like learning distance control to set up the takedowns and realizing when shots were on and when they're not. And then when we hit the ground, for me, I guess like my ego is like I never want to be in the bottom position So I'd take someone down, I'd jump into the closed guard and be like, right, cool, I'm winning a wrestling match, this is fine for me. And then 2 minutes later, I get submitted. Like, they throw up a triangle or an arm bar or something like that. I'm like, oh shit, how did that happen? So again, just understanding what's applicable to MMA and what's only applicable to wrestling, like that was a big learning curve for me. And just purely through, because at one point I was in coaching like 8 different gyms around Melbourne. Just by having the resources, like a lot of really good jiu-jitsu guys or a lot of really good striking guys who help my understanding as well. And when I started getting a bit more in understanding the other sports, I was like, all right, cool. So I can adapt wrestling based off X, Y, and Z concept, but like fundamentally it's still the same shot. I just need to find a new way to get there. And that for me
Mm.
was probably the biggest learning curve. And the other thing as well, when I started cornering in MMA, I would get guys who are like, oh, my main style, like I'd be a Thai fighter, so like my stance is super upright, my waist in my back leg, real light in the front leg, and it's like they come to me maybe a week before a fight and be like, oh, can you teach me how to defend takedowns? I'm like, well, no. It's like I
Yeah.
can teach you in a week how to be an effective defensive wrestler. I'm like, if you want to learn like to defend takedowns but still have like a good Thai base, then it's going to take a bit of work. Like you can't, like it's going to take reps and reps to like hard lessons and failing and like getting taken down and getting back up and getting taken down again before things start to click. And I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying about like maybe younger dudes trying to take shortcuts and learn something like in fight week that they should have maybe learned 3, 4, 5 months ago by just coming to general class. You know what I mean? Like if you kind of if you want to be an MMA fighter, I would say get experience in jiu-jitsu, get experience in boxing, get experience in Muay Thai, wrestling, like whatever you think you can implement to your game. Like you have to get as much of broad experience as you can. And for me as a coach, that applied as well. Because as I say, like when I first started at Invictus and Absolute and all that sort of stuff, I was just a pure wrestler. And I was teaching classes to get people competing in wrestling. It wasn't necessarily to like help develop their MMA. And really quickly, I realized like these guys, they've got zero interest in competing in wrestling. So I had to really tweak my coaching style to adapt to that as well.
Mm. And so was the way that you sort of started to learn the differences between the MMA wrestling and the like regular freestyle wrestling, was that just through training? Like, did you train yourself in some striking and some MMA to kind of put yourself in those uncomfortable
Yeah.
situations and try and adapt
Yeah.
and figure out what techniques work best?
Yeah. And look, to this day, I'm still doing it. Like I still train with the pros at Collingwood, and quite regularly
Mm.
they'll get to shout at me because my striking's terrible and my jiu-jitsu is not great. But it definitely gave me a better understanding like how to adapt. And as I say, there's nothing like a punch in the face to make you realize that something doesn't work as well as you think it's going to. And then
Yeah.
ate a few
Or
of
a
them. I was like,
knee.
all right, yeah, exactly. Ate a few punches, and I'm like, oh, like maybe I won't try that again. And then like found another way to adapt. And then once I find something, I can repeat something in sparring like quite regularly on like decent level guys. Then that's a concept that I'll take to my general class and try and teach in
Hmm.
the classes.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, And you said about so like in the beginning when you started to sort of experiment with MMA and you take someone down, land in their guard, and you thought you were winning the match, but then you get submitted. Like, do you think it's better to still fight for that top position? Because like I know that a lot of those now the Russian guys that are coming into the UFC, they resist the bottom position a lot. You know, they don't really try and get comfortable working submissions off their back.
Yeah.
So do you think it's more important to be able to maintain top control, or do you think it's more important to be dangerous off your back from your guard? Because yeah, I think that's a bit of a debate that people in the MMA camps have. So, what's your opinion on that?
I think, in a word, yes. Like I think top position is definitely best for MMA. In saying that though, if your submission defense from top is dog shit, but you're actually quite good off your back, maybe being a guard pro is better for you. But I just think like similar to the wrestling, like the minute you hit the ground in MMA, getting punched in the face changes jiu-jitsu. Like you're not going to
Hmm.
get. like you watch like Nogi Worlds or CGI or something like that. Everyone's like inverting and doing all these different kind of guards. You don't typically tend to see that in high level MMA. Maybe like something like Charles Oliveira, like a really high level grappler will try it, but like very rarely it's effective. Um, Whereas like generally speaking, like if you go to like a jiu-jitsu comp and you get stuck in close guards, it's not a great position to be. In MMA, I can punch posture and punch you in the face, and again, like that changed the entire dynamic in jiu-jitsu. So I think like to look at the most successful probably MMA grappler, I think a lot of people would say is Khabib. You look at his style, it
Mm.
was like get the takedown, stay on top, and get a ground and pound finish, or he'll take your back and try and slam out off your back. Um, and pretty much every fight he came out unscathed just because he stuck to the game plan. He knew what he was doing, and he finished like so many good guys just by having that one simple game plan that he knew he could implement. Um, and yeah, it worked so well for him. He's now in contention to be like one of the best ever. You know what I mean? Um, but again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. I don't really think like if you got hopes and dreams to be in the UFC, you can't ignore any one aspect. You have to be good at off your back. You have to be good on top. You have to be good on the feet. You have to be good at wrestling. And then like you can decide if your wrestling's good, you can be like, all right, cool. I want to keep the fight standing, or shit, this dude's punched me in the face a bunch of times. Let's take him down and try and get a finish on the ground. Like I think you have to make it to any kind of level in MMA nowadays. You have to be unbelievably well rounded to the point where like you look at Australian MMA 10, 15 years ago, the pros 10, 15 years ago, they'd be like a mid-level amateur card right now, based on like skill, um, the skills that they have. Like the guys who are fighting on like um amateur cards on Internal or Hex or whatever the promotion is here, they look like the professionals did 10, 15 years ago. You know what I mean? And it's very hard to tell the difference. And again, it just goes back to saying like everybody's so much more well-rounded nowadays. And I think that's the only way you can actually have any kind of career in MMA.
Yeah, for sure. As I said, like the level of skill has evolved so much because it's such a new sport. Um, but if you were to like I guess have your order of priorities, if someone said to you, okay, like I'm fighting in whatever amount of
Yeah,
time, you would probably put the top position above
yeah,
the submission attacks from your back.
yeah. I think
Yeah, for
it's
sure. For
as a
MMA,
yeah,
100%.
yeah, as an
Yeah.
amateur coming into the sport, I think top position is by far a better way to go for MMA.
hmm Yeah, definitely agree. And now I want to talk to you a little bit more about the details of, I guess, the difference between freestyle wrestling,
Yep,
what makes a good freestyle wrestler and what makes a good MMA wrestler. Because a good example is, I guess, right now is someone like Hamza.
yep,
He's Swedish national champ or something like that.
yep,
But if he went to go compete in freestyle wrestling against Olympic level guys, he probably wouldn't
yeah,
really do that well
yeah,
in that rule set. But
yeah,
his MMA wrestling is probably better than anyone else in the
mm,
whole promotion right now.
yeah,
So what makes the MMA wrestling so good, and what differences are there from the best MMA wrestler, which is someone like Hamza,
yeah,
and the best like freestyle wrestler, like someone like Sadulayev
yeah.
or whoever.
Honestly, the biggest thing I would say is literally how you're setting up your takedown. So kind of what we touched on before. So
Mm.
for wrestling, like, um, I guess when I'm competing or when I'm training, I never really have a thought about which takedown I want to hit. I'll chain together four, five, six, seven setups, and I'll see what openings appear, and I'm like, all right, once I see an open, I'll just like jump onto that as fast as I can. Um, so the difference being like, because even at Absolute when I'm sparring in the gym, there's guys who if we wrestle freestyle, I'll take them down at will, stand back up, and it'll just be same story over and over and over again. The
Mm.
minute you start adding the striking in, it changes my entire setup game. And I like because my striking's way less effective than my wrestling setups, it's much harder. So like I might even find like, yeah, I'll get to a leg, but it's much, much harder for me to finish purely because the setup wasn't there to begin with. I've lost posture, my grip now might not be as strong. Um, and again, like if you know how to set up a takedown, once you actually get to the legs, it's relatively easy to finish. But yeah, getting there, that's the hard part. So again, regardless of like what takedown it is, whether it's like single leg, double leg, body lock, high crotch, any kind of like takedowns that you see in MMA, um, if you know how to get the setup to get there, it becomes easy to finish. If you don't know how to set up, you're going to have a really hard time getting takedowns yourself. And the same goes for wrestling. The biggest kind of overlooked thing for people in wrestling comps is they'll, especially like in Australia where we don't have exposure to like real high level wrestling, you see a lot of like younger wrestlers come in and they have zero setup. They'll just run out a double leg and like hope for the best. And
Mm.
half the time it works, half the time it doesn't. But again, if there's a bit of a level difference, you tend to see um the guys who are regularly winning and getting a lot of takedowns, they'll chain four, five, six setups, and once they see an opening, they know for a fact they're getting the takedown. Like that's the biggest difference to me.
Yeah. And and I guess when it comes to MMA or wrestling, both, I guess, what are you looking for that setup? Are you looking for his weight to be on the more on the back foot? Are you trying to get his weight to the back foot? Are you trying to get the angle on him? Are you trying
Yeah,
to get his hips up a little bit, like straight
yeah,
for him to straighten his hips out a little bit?
yeah.
What sort of things are you looking for to try and make that takedown successful? And how are you trying to get there? And with the training together, this setups, talk to me a little bit about like those sorts of things you're mentioning.
Yeah. But I guess like if you look at MMA, I reckon the most common takedown would be your double leg. Like it's what all wrestlers kind of go to. But I reckon the most common setup would actually be like slipping or like ducking under a cross. So like as you throw
Hmm.
your cross, your hips square up, it makes it really hard to sprawl. I think that's probably
Hmm.
to give you like a real quick example, like the most common kind of takedown you'll see. So again, if you see a lot of people like if you're fighting someone and they're really sitting down in that cross and you can time it, more often than not, if you get the legs, you should get a finish. The other thing I guess that we don't have to worry about in wrestling that does change the dynamic a lot would be like wall wrestling. So even now, like adapting and be like, all right, cool, I've
Hmm.
got like a really good double leg, and you like in your head, it's like in the open space. If I run through this, they'll fall to the ground. But then in MMA, say for example, I've backed someone up to the cage and I've gotten there with striking, and I take a shot. If I run into a wall, it then changes how I finish that technique. So it depends whether I want to pull him off the wall, I want to use the wall to the left. Like generally speaking, for me, I'll try and like get to the wall and rip him back off it so they can't wall walk when they hit the ground. Um, but everybody's different in that scenario. And even then, like when you hit the wall, you can then chain a body lock, or you might choose to come up the body because it's an easier route to finish than like a single leg or a double leg, just because it's in my opinion a little bit easier to take away the base once you get to the fence. But then when
Yeah.
you hit the ground again, if you've secured the legs, it's harder for them to scramble and stand up. Whereas if you go body lock, it might be a little bit easier for them to pop their hips up and start wall walking. So you kind of have to weigh up like a lot of different factors that just as a
Mm.
pure wrestler, like I never had to think about. So again, even like the wall wrestling aspect of that, that's something that took me a little bit to get used to as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've seen a lot of guys these days having success wrestling off the wall.
Mhm.
So it's definitely like one of those unique things to MMA
Yeah,
that is like kind of a newer aspect of combat sports in general, I guess, is fighting off that wall.
yeah,
Um, Now you said that the double leg is probably the most common
yeah.
takedown. Um, what do you think, I guess, are the most effective things to drill for MMA? Because you see, like, obviously these are the most, I guess, common takedowns because they're the most popular. Do you think that other types of takedowns would have more success if they were more popular? If that makes
Mhm.
sense. Like, for
Yeah,
example, you see guys like Peter Yan. He does a lot of like outside foot sweeps and
yeah,
stuff like that. So that's a sort of different style, but it is really
yeah,
effective as well, and it is a different style. Do you think those would be a lot more common and more effective if they were more popular?
yeah. Um, yes and no. Like it's kind of a hard question to answer, but like, um,
Mm.
I think like the double leg, even in wrestling, it's probably the most common takedown. Like, yeah, you do like in world championships, you'll see foot sweeps, you'll see big throws, you'll see single legs, blah blah blah. But I think like just as a bread and butter takedown, like the double leg, it's relatively safe. Like the main thing you have to worry about is eating a knee on the way in or getting guillotined. If you kind of address that on the way in, once you actually get the legs, it's a relatively, I think like low risk, high reward technique.
Hmm.
Whereas the foot sweeps in that, I think the big thing with foot sweeps, it depends a lot on the timing. So like if you feel comfortable hitting your foot sweeps, you probably gravitate towards that pretty quickly. Whereas a double leg, I think is a technique that most people can probably understand just by looking at it and seeing like, oh, right, you grab both legs, run through them, and have like a bit of an idea of what it looks like. They might not hit all the kind of technical points that I would look for in a double leg, but as a general kind of like just visual representation, like it's probably easier for someone to see a double leg and copy and get it majority right than see like a really technical foot sweep and get that like to hit bang on,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
But like I
Yeah.
say, I think there's definitely scope to kind of broaden the horizons and see what techniques work. Um, but it's going to take a lot of trial and error to get there.
Yeah. Like if you were starting a fighter from scratch, which
Mhm.
I'm sure you've
Yeah,
started a lot of fighters from scratch. What are the I mean, obviously you're in the wrestling and stuff, but what are you the main things you want them to focus on
yeah,
from the beginning, both in wrestling, like freestyle
yeah,
wrestling, and MMA? Like if you were gonna narrow it down to a few important things, like I
yeah,
guess say three or four,
yeah.
you know, what would
Uh,
you say? And it can be like a specific technique, it can
yeah.
be a mindset or anything. Just three or a few things that are the most important that if anyone's listening right now and they want to like really just become a machine,
Yeah,
what will they have to do?
yeah. I think in terms of wrestling for MMA, I would start with leg defense. Like if you can defend a leg attack and you don't get taken down, if you're comfortable in the feet, you can stay in the feet for as long as you want. A good double leg is obviously a great option. So solid leg defense and a solid double leg, you can literally determine whether the fight stays standing or whether it goes to the ground. So if you're a better grappler than striker and you're getting pieced up in the feet, you're like, oh, I don't like this. Shoot your double leg, take it down. If you're a better striker and you're against like a better grappler, sorry, like better probably jiu-jitsu grappler, I would say. And you don't want to get taken down because there's a chance you might get subbed, or even if you get the takedown, they might throw up submissions from bottom. If you've got good leg defense, then you can like keep the fight standing and you can piece them up on the feet. And then if it's a relatively even fight and you can mix it up, I think that's where like the real advantage comes in. Um, and I guess to kind of add like anything else that I would add, I think just have a mindset where you're willing to work hard and grind and just put up with like feeling terrible in certain spots. Because um, I found like one of the biggest things that helped me become quite mentally strong was when I was competing in the common games. I was cutting a lot of weight for it, so I was walking around like close to 90 kilos and competing in 74, and that was for a same day
Oh
weigh-in.
wow.
So just having like on like a 35-degree day when I've had like minimal calories, like nothing to drink, going for a run and just feeling like absolute crap, but then like finishing the run and knowing that I had the mental strength to do it and like just grind and like put up with the shit feeling that you have. Because when all said and done and like you've done the hard work, once you get the fight, everyone will seem easy at that point because you know like the work you've put in to get there. You've done the work with your coaches, you know the technique you're going to use, whether it's striking or grappling. You got a game plan, and as I say, if you put every ounce effort into your training camp, like you literally can't ask for anything more. It's just like, well, at that point, the results irrelevant. It will take care of itself. It's like if you get beat, you tried your hardest and you got beaten by someone better. If you win, all the hard work paid off. So like to me, like in my head, that was just a win-win. So as I say, like kind of get used to feeling like shit at certain points and learning how to manage that and push through and come out the other side and know that you're at your best.
Yeah, and I think mindset is one of the most important things, and it's often overlooked.
Yeah,
Um, you know, when you start competing, and in order to like make the right decisions when you're fighting, I think you need to be calm and be able to perform under pressure. I honestly would probably say that's what the difference between a good fighter and a great fighter is,
Yeah,
or any competitor in any sport. Um, and you mentioned that you worked with the mindset
yeah,
coach. So what's your sort of mindset when you're going into competition, or when you have your students going into competition, whether that be wrestling or MMA, whatever it is? How do you deal with the stress of competing, and how do you coach your guys through that? Like, what techniques is it? Is it just like what you said, like make sure you're doing the hard yards in camp, or is there some sort of other philosophies and mindsets that you have when you're dealing with those uncomfortable feelings?
yeah. I think there's a few different aspects to this. Like doing the hard work, like that's kind of non-negotiable. Like you have to do that, and you can always take comfort in the fact knowing that you've worked as hard as you can. But like even to that extent, like everybody gets nervous. Like it's just knowing how to like channel the nerves to get like a positive result. Like that's the hard part. So
Mm.
when I was younger, like I used to suffer like really really badly on competition day. I just get nerves, like stomach cramps, all that sort of stuff. And then through speaking to psychologists, one of the big things that really really helped me was just putting everything in perspective. So I used to think like when I was competing internationally, so like if I'm getting ready for the Olympics, it's like all right, my support team that I was talking about earlier, so like friends, family, my girlfriend, coaches, the federation, sponsors, all that sort of stuff. I was like, in my head, I'm like, shit, if I don't win this comp, I've just let all these people down. And one of the big things that my psychologist said to me is like, all right, so who really cares about your result? And I said all those people that I just spoke about. Like, all right, cool. So, um, at the end of the day, the national federation, were you the best wrestler they could have sent to the competition? Yeah, I was like, yep. It's like, so do they care if you want to lose? Like, maybe they might care because they want you to do well, but like, in the grand scheme of things, if you lose, does it look bad on them? I'm like, nah, because they sent the best person they could. He's like, all right, your friends, family, loved ones. It's like, if you lose, do they stop loving you for that? And I'm like, no, they don't. And so just kind of having that like
Yeah.
idea that like, yeah, like wrestling is important to me and it's only important to me. Um, it helped took a lot of the pressure off me that I was kind of putting on myself. And just having that like fresh perspective was like, all right, cool. I know where I'm at. Like, and like I say, at that point in my head, I'm like, all right, train my arse off. I've worked as hard as I physically can. If anyone's got an issue with me losing, then that's their problem, not mine. And then I guess one of the things, because obviously you every time you compete, you want to believe that you can win in every scenario. Like everybody on any given day is beatable. Like if I was going to wrestle Olympic champion, might be a 1 in a million chance that I do something really lucky and beat him. And I think you have to have that mindset going in. If you go in and be like, oh shit, I'm up against a world champion, there's no point me even stepping on the mat. Like you're beaten before you even step on. And one of the things my psychologist done that was I found really helpful for me, he got me to rate myself from on a scale of 1 to 10. So like one being absolute terrible, worst it could be, 10 being like Olympic champion level. And he got me to go like identify like 10 things that make a good wrestler. So there's like the skills, the mindset, physical conditioning, opportunities, previous experience, blah 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 blah. And he got me to go through it, and he's like, on each of these scales, rank yourself from 1 to 10. So it'd be like, all right, in terms of like flexibility was a big one for me. As a wrestler, I was never flexible, so I gave myself like a 3 in flexibility. Um, in terms of work ethic, I gave myself a 9 because I always worked hard. And in terms of like the coaches that I had available, I gave myself a 9 because my coaches, in my opinion, were genuinely world class. And by able to like compare myself against like the best of the best in the world, it's like, all right, cool. So look, you've given yourself a couple of nines, 1 3, couple of fours, couple of fives. So like just as an objective like look in terms of like being international level wrestler, I was kind of like right in the middle of the road. I was pretty much like decent level amateur, but never like that world class kind of level. So just having that knowledge in the back of my mind, like, yeah, I could beat anyone on any given day, but I don't have the resources that these guys have to be at that elite level. And it just for me that helped me take a lot of pressure off because again, it's my own internal view of myself. And I think a lot of the time when I was competing, I expected a lot more than what I was capable of, and that's where the nerves came from. Understanding what you're capable of is good, but you always have to have that belief in the back of your mind that you can beat anyone, like regardless of how good they are. And I think that goes a long way to helping, or it helped me a lot.
Yeah, that's really interesting that I guess you're saying that confidence, like it's important to be confident in your abilities, but also not being delusional and
Yeah,
I guess being honest with yourself.
yeah, 100
Because you
percent.
find like that difference in between like yeah, like someone like for example Ilya Tapuria, he talks a lot
Yeah,
and a lot of people say he's arrogant and whatever. But if he wasn't actually performing that way, then he'd be delusional,
yeah,
you know. But he
exactly.
actually is performing and doing what he says, so he's honest with himself in what he can do in his performance. So that's a really interesting perspective in that you have to really, I guess, be honest with yourself, but not beating yourself up at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And like so on fight day or on match day,
Mm.
are you just sort of like repeating and just trying to remember all those exercises you've done, like mental exercises,
Yeah.
and just being confident in yourself? Do you have any like mantras that you say or something like that, or is it
It,
just trying to remember everything like that you go through with
it,
the?
it, yeah, it was really strange for me because like when I was young, I was really, really bad when it came to nerves, and I never performed as well as I should have a lot of time just because of nerves. Um,
Hmm.
but I used to tend to find like in bigger competitions where the expectation wasn't for me to win, it was just to go there and compete. I actually performed a lot better because there's way less pressure on my shoulders. But I think like later on when I learned how to deal with the nerves a bit better, um, it was quite strange because I'd still be nervous the morning of, and I'd be riding to the stadium, have my headphones on and be listening to music, try to like calm myself down. But it was just like the minute I kind of got my gear on and like got on the mat and started warming up, it was just like a switch went off, and like from then the nerves just disappeared. And throughout the last maybe like 4 or 5 years when I was competing, I never really had that kind of crippling anxiety where my stomach would cramp and all that sort of stuff. And it was just like it was kind of like my body was an autopilot. Like there wasn't really anything specific that I had done to change that. It's just yeah, I think from working with a psychologist, it helped me deal with the nerves, but like it wasn't a conscious decision that I made. It was just all right through months and months and months of work. Um, I knew that as soon as I step on the warm up mat, like it's just a switch, and I'm like on autopilot. I go through my day, and I'll wrestle as well as I can wrestle. And as I say, like I don't really have a good answer for why it happened. It just all of a sudden one day clicked for me.
Hmm. Do you think like having just your regular warm-up routine and kind of going
Yeah,
through the motions helped that? Or
yeah,
do you
yeah,
think it was just
definitely.
something you can't put your finger on where it's just like your body knows what's about to happen and is prepared for it?
Yeah, I I think like having a routine is good, but also having like knowing how to handle it if your routine is broken. So like there's comps where I had where we go to warm up and then like the schedule be brought forward or pushed back and then you had to get delays and all that sort of stuff. And I would then have to adapt on the fly, but knowing that like, all right, cool, it's a mini setback, but not letting it get to my head.
Mm.
That was I think it just came with experience, honestly. Like, I really can't put my finger on what it was that clicked that made me handle it better as I got older. Um, but just yeah, as I say, like my last 4 or 5 years of competition where I probably wrestled the best I ever had in my life. Um, my mindset on the day comp was just a million times better than what it was when I was a kid. And like I say, I think one of the big things was understanding that like at the end of the day, the only person that really the result really mattered to was me. And I took a lot of pressure off myself by doing that. And then when I started my warm, like I say, when I started my warm up at the competition, it was just like absolute clear focus. I knew the job that had to be done. I was like, all right, if I've done the work, I'll do it. If I've been lazy, if I've slacked off, probably won't do it. And then like most of the time, I got the results I was looking for.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, because of any combat sport, I guess a lot of people might think that aggression or anger or something like that might help your performance. But like obviously I've found that hinders your performance and makes you make bad decisions. So how important do you think it is to be able to remain calm and like yeah, like what sort of importance do you place on that? Because lately I've found that to be like the number one thing I want to work on is
Yeah,
to be able to remain calm in any situation that may unfold um, in a fight or in a
yeah,
competition. And I feel like that's when I perform my best is when I'm as calm as can be, calm and focused. Like
yeah.
it's a sort of a hard state to explain, but like I guess people might think that aggression helps when it doesn't. So what's your thoughts on that?
I'm the same as you. I think focus is the big one for me. Again, like one of the things that my psychologist and I worked on was like when so wrestling's like it's got a scoring system. You get points allocated for certain techniques and that. And he was like, "All right, if you get taken
Mm,
down in a fight, like how long do you dwell on the fact that you've just lost these points?" And I'm like, "Oh, probably 20 30 seconds." He's like, "So in a
mm,
6 minute match, you've spent 20 or 30 seconds of that 6 minutes, which is a big chunk of time in that time period, thinking about points that you just lost when it's in the past. Like you physically can't change that decision anymore." So what like one of the big things we worked on is like, all right, the focus then shifts. It's like, right, say you get taken down, you like in your head you're like, oh fucking idiot, and you take like 2 seconds, and it's like, all right, it's in the past. Let's move on and let's just start from scratch. Like that there, that was a big turning point for me. So like again, it's like you're never going to have the perfect performance. Like it's a fight. Like you're there to get punched in the face, or you're there to get taken down, or you're there to get submitted. It's not always going to go your way, but like being able to remain like calm and present and focused and just controlling what you can control in that moment goes a like to me that goes a long way to getting the best results.
yeah, for sure. And I'm glad that we can sort of agree on that because
Yeah.
it's something that like I wanted to hear from your perspective, given how much competition experience you have. So yeah, it's good to sort of see it from your perspective as well, because I yeah, I definitely think that that's like a game changer for maybe any athletes that are listening now is like just being calm and being able to make good decisions when you're in the fight is so important. So I wanted to talk as well a little bit about like your career. So you started off coaching wrestling, now you've transitioned into MMA, now you're the national coach for freestyle in Australia, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so talk to me about like how your career progression has gone. Was it always your goal to like be the national coach of Australia, or was it like, something that just sort of happened as you kept going along and yeah, talk to me about that the journey in terms of your career and what you've sort of learned along the way, I guess.
Yeah. Um, I guess for me, like I've wrestled since I was 6 years old. It's pretty much like big part of my identity. So and when I started competing, like I knew I still wanted to have some level of involvement in the sport. So I I continued working with the national. I've still got friends who are on the national team that like when we run camps and that, I'll go up and even if I'm there as a coach, I'll be there as a training partner for them because I can still move and I can still help them improve and blah blah blah.
Hmm.
Um, and like I really enjoy being involved with the sport. It's something I'll always be passionate about. Like I'll be 60, 70 if I'm still alive by then. I hope to still have some kind of involvement in wrestling. So it was never really a goal in mind to be the national coach. It just kind of the circumstances worked where I'm coaching full time anyway. It's my job. I'm still very active with the coaching side of it. And I'm really lucky. My work are really supportive of me fulfilling the coaching role with the national team as well. So having their support and then like working close with the national team for the last 4 or 5 years since I've retired myself. Um, the opportunity came up and I was like, oh look, I'll apply for it. We'll see what happens. There's a few other good coaches who applied as well. I was like, if I get it, awesome. If not, I'm still happy to be involved and just help in whatever capacity that I can. Um,
Mm,
and as I say, like I'm assuming it'll be like yearly they re-elect the national coach. So whether it's me next year or sorry, this coming year or not, it remains to be seen. But
hmm.
um, I'm in it for the long run. Like I'm here to help grow wrestling in Australia. I want to give people the opportunity to compete and get the opportunities that I've had growing up. And I've been lucky enough to travel like a lot of the world for wrestling. It's gave me opportunities that I never would have had if I'd never started it. So
Mm.
I think there is like my biggest thing is just trying to get exposure for wrestling. Like I think it's a great sport. Complements MMA. Really good for like mental toughness and resilience. I think it's like getting kids involved in wrestling is like such a good. It's really good for character development. It teaches them like, yeah, look, life's not always going to go the way you want it. Boo-hoo. Like you'll live to fight another day and you can come back. And then the next time you train, like it'll be your day kind of thing. So I think like yeah, for me, like I'll always have some kind of involvement within wrestling. Uh, whatever capacity that is, I don't know. But like as I say, if I can until the day I die, if I'm involved, I'll be quite happy at that.
Yeah, that's awesome, bro, to hear how passionate you are about the sport. I mean, that's what Australia needs to be able to grow the sport. Like guys like you that are passionate. I've worked with some other coaches like the Abdo brothers who are also big in the sport and really passionate about it. And I think with guys like all of you guys, you know, hopefully the sport can grow in Australia because
Yeah.
I definitely can see a great future for it. So, um, now I ask a lot of fighters or competitors this as well, right? Where what do you think the difference between a good coach and a good fighter is? Because a lot of people who don't know much about combat sports, they might just say like, "Oh, you know, this guy was three-time world champion and whatever." And obviously, I think it's important to have some sort of combat experience in order to be able to coach it. But just because someone's a three-time world champion or something doesn't necessarily mean they'll be a world champion coach.
Yeah.
So you've been coaching for a while now,
Mhm.
and you've achieved some great things. So what do you think? What are your thoughts on that in terms of what's the difference and what makes a good coach versus a good fighter?
Um, I'll probably go against the grain with probably what a lot of people say is like um, kind of putting your ego in check. Um, I know that like if I continue coaching wrestling, there's guys who I'll coach that will end up being better wrestlers than I ever was. And I think at the end of the day, that as a good coach, like that should be your goal. Um, if
Mm,
you can get the guys that you're coaching to be better than you ever were, I think like job well done. I think
sure.
a lot of coaches, and like don't get me wrong, there's a lot of very, very good coaches out there, but a lot of the kind of not so good coaches, they let their ego get in the way a lot. So like they'll be in the gym and they'll jump into sparring rounds with the wrestlers and just try and destroy them every round. And it's like your wrestlers don't benefit from that. Like unless you're trying to prove a specific point and you're like, oh, here's a weakness that we can fix up. But
Mm,
like there's guys who will to a fault every time they're in there. They make the sparring rounds about themselves and not the people they're trying to coach. So I think that's like a
yeah.
big thing. Like just leave your ego at the door
Mm,
and
for sure.
understanding that. And again, this is a big learning curve for me. Understanding that you don't know the answer to every single question that people are going to ask, and just having the kind of humility to be like, I don't know. I'll try and find out. I'll come back to you another day. And like it might be something the case of where like I don't have a good answer for that, and I'll probably never will. But I can point you in the direction of another coach who can answer that question. You know what I mean? So like I encourage a lot of cross training with my guys. Like I think it's the only way to get better is to cross train and get more experience. Um, and I think that's one thing that Wrestling Australia is actually doing quite well right now. Is within the national team, there's a core group of coaches who've been involved for like the last 4 or 5 years, and each one of them, regardless of like what camp it is, will have a chance to take a session and show a couple of things to like each of the wrestlers that they know that they might not get if it's just me like coaching the entire time. Um,
Mhm.
and I'd say I think one of the biggest things for me is just being able to say like, all right, cool, I might be the national coach, but like the assistant coach makes like a really good point that I missed when I was giving my instructions. I'll give him the floor for 4 or 5 minutes. He can explain what he needs to explain, and then we go on with the session from that. I think
Mm.
that's like to me working as part of a team, and as say just expecting that if you're doing your job, your guys that you're coaching will eventually be better than you ever will be. And if you've done that,
Hmm.
like you've done a good job.
Yeah. It's interesting that you said that you can sort of, I guess, delegate or not delegate, but refer people to other coaches. I think that a lot of coaches might feel some certain way about that.
Yeah,
But I definitely think it's the right way, and I think that also fighters and anyone in those in combat sports need to know that their coach is not just there to know every single little technique. It's there to look after your
yeah,
development.
yeah,
So there might be some things that your coach won't know,
yeah,
as long as he's again got your best interests at heart and he's able to be honest with you and say, hey man, go ask,
yeah,
maybe this guy who'll know better, and then that process of learning. So
yeah.
um yeah, I guess, would you say that the most important thing between I guess a coach and a fighter is like leaving that ego at the door and
Yeah,
just focusing on the development of the
yeah,
fighter?
absolutely. Like the fighter development should be your number one priority. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, nice. Now, I guess, what do you want to plan to do? What do you got in store to try and bring wrestling more in the spotlight in Australia?
yeah.
Is there any sort of like, what's the future look like, and what are your goals for the future of wrestling in Australia? Yeah.
So I guess like kind of within Victoria, I'm on the Victorian board, um, trying to help build stuff up. So even in Victoria this year, I think we were looking at organising 6 or 7 competitions, which is the most we've run by a long way in a long time. And as well as that, we've got a bunch of different programs. So we're looking at like women's development programs, youth development programs, and again, just trying to get that wide exposure at grassroots level and get like kids involved in the sport. Um, we we've actually got a documentary crew who are working with Victorian Wrestling this year. They're going to be coming to a few of the clubs and doing a few of our events, and I think they might be able to get us on like Fox Sports or something like that. So just again, like reaching new
Mm.
audiences that maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago just wouldn't have been possible. Um, in terms of the national team, my immediate plan for myself is just be there, support the guys that are coming through, work with other coaches there, try just honestly like develop Australian wrestling to as best as we can be. Um, Generally speaking, like we're quite a small fish in a big pond. So
Mm.
it, to me, like individual club level results and individual state level results at the national championships, it's like, yeah, cool. That it is what it is. Like if your club's the best, cool, good for you. I'll give you a round of applause at the day of nationals. But when it comes to the national team, like my view is regardless of your club, your state, your politics, whatever it is, if you're the best wrestler for the sport, let's get you overseas. Let's get you as much experience as we can while you're in Australia. Let's get the best guys going to your gym to help you out. Like as far as I'm concerned, if you're the best in country, you should get priority when it comes to funding, training, your focus. Like a lot of the attention should go to you. Provided that you're willing to work with us and like give us the same work back. So anything that I can do to help develop athletes in the national team, all for it. And then more specifically for Victoria, build grassroots wrestling and get more people involved.
Hmm. Do with wrestling, how does the competition structure work? Is there like different, I guess, leagues in terms of skill level, or is it just one
Oh,
competition per weight class
yeah,
for how does it work like that? Because
yeah, yeah,
I mean, if you're trying to build it up, it's like it's hard to get. I mean, I guess if you compare it with somewhere like America, they have high school wrestling, and then you go into college, and you know, then you can go to the Olympics. Like, how do you get, I guess, that high school level wrestling that they have in America? How do you do that here, and how do you get these, up and comers to get the rounds in and get the experience in?
yeah.
Um, I mean, is there like different leagues, or like how's the sort of structure with that, and how do you think the best way to go about that is?
I think as much exposure to competition as possible. Like that's definitely something that we need to work on in Australia.
Hmm.
And again, that's why in Victoria this year we're aiming to like almost triple the number of competitions that we had last year.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, again, like because we are a minority sport in Australia, like a big issue we run into is funding. So, like to put on events, it does become expensive, and like you say, we don't have that high school
Mm.
system that America has and all that sort of stuff. Um, it's something that I really want to start looking into is like how to get schools programs on the go. Whether
Mm-hmm.
that's done
Mm-hmm.
nationally or on a state by state basis. Um, I think even if we could get like within Victoria, 5 or 6 schools involved, and just have those schools competing against each other. Be like, oh look, we're the Victorian schools champion, and then you can have like make it competitive, make it fun for kids to get involved. I think that's a really good way to grow it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that's obviously going to take a lot of work, and I'm not quite sure what would be involved in that, but it's definitely avenues that we're looking at like going forward. Um,
Yeah.
but in terms of just like someone who wants to begin wrestling, there's no kind of real like jiu-jitsu where you got a belt system, so you're not like a white belt, then a blue belt, then purple, then brown,
Yeah.
black. It's like if you agree to go to a wrestling competition, you wrestle whoever's in your weight on the day. So you
Mm.
mentioned Ali Abdo and Billy Abdo before. We're running
Mm.
some minute club comps between Absolute and
Mm.
AT and Matt Masters,
Oh,
who'd be
awesome.
I mean Yukibi. Um,
Yeah.
and just for that reason, like we've all got
Mm.
our kind of more experienced guys who will go on and compete at like state and national level, and then if they're
Yeah.
good enough, international. But like the majority of guys
Yeah.
that train, they're doing it for MMA and jiu-jitsu. It's like, all right, here's a grassroots level comp. Come and test
Mm.
what we've been working on in class and like a real situation. It's relatively safe, good rule set. Like you're not going to get hurt. And we'll just try and make it as beginner friendly as possible. So there is avenues for beginners to get involved, and then,
Mm.
uh, but once you then get past the national level, it's quite a steep learning curve because going from like Australian nationals to an international standard is a massive jump. Um, and I
Mm.
think the best way to kind of get ahead of that would be getting there at a young age. So it's very hard once you get to like your senior years, like 21 plus, and then going from the nationals to going international, expecting to get like higher results. But if you get a kid who's been national champion for 2 years by the time they're 11 or 12, we send them overseas and they can get an experience. And it's like, oh, wow, there's like a big gap that I need to make up. And they'll get shell shocked a little bit for the first time. But the more exposure that they get to that, it's like, all right, cool. These guys are miles ahead, but I'll make small incremental increases year on year on year. And eventually I'll start closing the gap. And then I'll maybe beat these guys in like 4 or 5 years' time. That's how I
Mm.
would look to develop it.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's definitely a roadmap there,
Yeah.
and it's exciting to think about the future for it because I think that having that interclub, those interclub competitions would be like awesome for people to just get the rounds in and get a little
Yeah.
bit of that competition experience. I mean, because in America they're competing like really often
Yeah.
in their high school leagues, so that would be, I guess, something that's sort of comparable. Um, so yeah, that's awesome that you guys are doing that. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of big things in store for the future. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Um, so now, I mean, that's the future of wrestling. What does your future look like? Are you still, as you said, you wanted to be involved in in the wrestling scene
Yeah.
till you kick the bucket?
Yeah. Very much.
But is there any specific sort of things you're looking at working on in the future, or you're just focusing on the sort of the national team and the coaching at your absolute?
Yeah.
Or is there anything specific you're working on?
Um, Honestly, like at this point, I've like nothing set in stone. Um, I'm really loving my job at Absolute. I think I've got the best job in the world. Good bunch of
Hmm.
guys there. Got on really well with the owners and the bosses. Um, we're now getting guys fighting in big promotions. So we got Jack Jenkins in the UFC, Ken Offley in the UFC,
Hmm.
Joey Luciano in Bellator.
Hmm.
We had Lisa Kiriakou fight on the UFC Road to UFC at the UFCPI in China. So again, like it's a really exciting time to be a part of the gym at Absolute because we've got a lot of like good prospects on the horizon, I guess. Um, in terms of like wrestling, like I really want to have like a quite a strong competition team from Absolute, representing like states and nationals and stuff. And yeah, like as I say, with the national team, I just want to be involved because I know like I've got more to give, and I think we've got a really good group of wrestlers who are currently involved that would benefit from having my experience there, and even just as a training partner, like I'm kind of fat and unfit in the minute, but like for a solid 3 minutes, I could probably do a bit of work. But yeah, I say like I love the sport. And for as long as I can walk, I'll try and be involved. I don't know in what capacity, but I'm always going to try and be there.
Yeah, awesome, bro. And yeah, I mean it's pretty cool to see that a lot of a lot of Aussie MMA fighters are starting to come through the ranks.
Yeah,
I feel like MMA is becoming one of the biggest sports in Australia and maybe more than anywhere else. And I think it's because there's maybe less wrestling and less other like professional sports in Australia that MMA is becoming massive.
yeah,
Have you noticed that as well? Or,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
yeah. Like there's some great competitors, and yeah, like the all the guys you mentioned, it's going to be exciting to see what they bring to the UFC. They're all so talented and so
yeah,
skilled as well. So yeah, I mean, it's very exciting for Aussie wrestling, Aussie MMA. There's a lot of development happening. So
yeah,
it's a cool time to be able to witness it. Um, Now we'll start to wrap up shortly.
yeah.
I just want to ask you as well, do you do and do you recommend for your students to do a lot of film study, and how do you go about film study? Is that something that you do a lot of, that
Yeah.
you think is super important, or are you more just on the mat and that's it?
Nah, like I do a lot of analysis. Like when
Mm.
we were getting ready for the Olympics this year, and I was coaching the national team. Um, for a final qualifier, we need to qualify through Africa Oceania. So
Mm-hmm.
we identified for, I think we had a team of 12 people that went there. We identified for each
Mm-hmm.
wrestler, like the top 3 or 4 wrestlers in their division. And I went
Mm-hmm.
through and I done like probably 4 or 5 matches from each wrestler's opponent that we
Mm-hmm.
identified as like a good chance that they're going to be the tough matches. So
Mm-hmm.
I ended up doing honestly close to maybe like 80 hours of like film revision just for that one competition.
Oh
Um,
wow.
and then like sent to all our guys, and also like our guys also studied like our own matches to see where we were like needing to improve as well. And I
Mm.
kind of like when I done that, I had like a lot of data, like percentage of takedowns hit, what takedowns were working well, what takedowns weren't working so well for them. Even breaking down like what setup they were using to get to the takedowns, all that sort of stuff. Um,
Wow.
I think like for me with the analysis, I do it for the majority of my guys. Like I don't expect them to do too much, purely
Mm.
because I mean if they want to, like more than welcome to, but like I feel like I've got a good enough understanding where I can see where they're strong. And just by
Mm-hmm.
watching the analysis of them and their opponents, I can kind of bring a game plan together in my head and be like, all right, your easiest path to victory is ABC. If we follow this, we've got a good chance. If AB work and C doesn't, we then fall back to D, E, and F and like continue along that pattern until either you win the match or we adapt mid match sort of thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
for MMA, like it's a little bit different. I'll I'll focus mainly on the wrestling aspect of it because like absolute our head coach Simon, he does a lot of the video analysis himself, and
Mm-hmm.
he's extremely well rounded with his analysis. Like he's very good at striking, good at grappling, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, all the rest of it. So he'll kind of have very specific game plans for our guys when they're in camps. I'll do my own film analysis, and rather than giving it to the actual guys themselves, I'll say to Simon, "Oh, look here, I've identified this, this, and this in the wrestling. Whether you have or not, this is my opinion. And if you want to tell the guys to adapt based on what I've seen, then you can go and adapt like that." But like
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking, like a lot of the stuff that I pick out, like Simon would have already seen and identified like long in advance as well. So like at the point where it's like I'm kind of getting the my analysis to him, like he's like, "Yep, cool, I agree with that," or "Oh, this might or might not work based on X, Y, and Z." But I think for individual athletes, it's good, but I would be focusing more on doing analysis on yourself rather than your opponent. Like find the areas of your game that
Mm.
you want to improve, not necessarily where your opponent's weak, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, and do you think that's what makes a good coach as well, is being able to conduct those analyses and I mean, the team that you have at Absolute, obviously, it sounds like it's a collaborative effort.
Yeah.
And do you think that's like part of your success? I feel like a lot of coaches or a lot of athletes might not even know what goes on behind the scenes with these sorts of things,
Yeah.
with the studying and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like the majority of the head coaches in each discipline absolute will do some form of film review, whether that's to help themselves or just get a better understanding or help the students. Like it is definitely like
Mm.
a team effort there. As I say, Simon's like the head coach, like he definitely runs things from the top. But he's always open to have input from other coaches. So like if I think I noticed something, like he'll always give me the time of day and he'll be like, oh yeah, cool. Yep, I like that idea, or maybe this will work better. And then wait, there's always a discussion. It's never just like, nah, this is how we're doing things because I said this is how it happens. Like it's definitely a good environment to kind of like talk and have ideas like cross paths and all that sort of stuff.
Mm. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess I mean I think a lot of people won't even realize that that's what it
Yeah,
takes.
yeah,
I mean, and that's like what you're looking for in a coach essentially is someone that's able to do that,
yeah,
put in that work and see those things and get those strategies. Um, so with that being said, what would your advice be for any athletes looking for a potential coach? What sort of qualities are they looking for? We touched on it a little bit before, but like specifically, if you were going to list some qualities, what would they be?
yeah. I think definitely technical understanding, like where they had
Hmm.
results to back it up themselves. But like if you like you were saying touched on earlier, like you don't have to be the best athlete to be a good coach. So
Mm.
as long as you've got a
Hmm.
technical understanding and you can explain it to your students, then that's a good option. And like we touched on before, I think like having the best interest of your student at heart, like that should be your number one priority. So like as long as your students are developing and becoming better, like if you go into a session and come out 1% better every session, like that's a win in my book. Like if you're going there and your coach makes you feel miserable and like you come out of training like, oh fuck, what was the point of me even training tonight? Like I didn't learn anything.
Mm.
Um, I was there as like a punching bag for one of the more elite guys in the team. Like
Yeah,
probably not the place that I'd be looking to train. But
yeah,
if your coach has your best interest at heart, like you should be able to talk about difficult things. Like it might not be the answer you want to hear, but they'll always be honest with you. You know what I mean? Like that to me is a really
mm.
important fact. Um, and then just as I say, like being able to rely on other members of the team, especially for MMA, because like I don't think any one coach can cover all bases for MMA. I think it has to be like
Mm.
a massive team effort to get the best performance out of like individuals.
Yeah,
So
yeah, for sure.
yeah,
No, it's all right.
it's all good.
Yeah, we'll wrap up soon.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so I mean, I guess to sum it up, you're saying like someone who's honest with you
yeah,
and who put your own interests above
yeah,
theirs and with the technical understanding.
yeah.
Um, and what are I guess or a few things that you'd say for an athlete. I mean, we touched on it again, but like, is the work ethic the most important thing?
In my opinion, absolutely. Like if you got a good work ethic and you're willing to learn, then that to me is like the number
Mm.
one attribute I'd look for. You
Yeah,
may not be the
willingness to
best.
learn for sure.
Yeah, you may not have the best skills. You may not be the physically the
Mm.
most fit. But I'd say like
Mm.
there's times where I've been in wrestling matches and like the guy is technically a much worse wrestler than me, but just refuses to quit. And then at the
Yeah.
end, like a match that should have been easy in my head becomes difficult. Like they're the worst matches in the
Mm.
world. Like so
Yeah.
again, just having that work ethic and just not being willing to back down, like massive
Mm.
check in my book.
For sure. For sure. All right, Connor, we'll wrap up. Before we do you have a favorite quote that you live by or that you tell your students as well? Is there anything like
Gee,
your main philosophy? What would you base it around?
put me on the spot.
Yeah, a little bit.
I genuinely couldn't give you a good answer for that story.
No, like what's one I guess lesson that like one of the main lessons that you give your guys in a quote? Like I would say sometimes if you fail to prepare, prepare to fail,
Yeah,
type of
that
thing. Is that
honestly,
one that you use?
I think that's a great quote. Like that that
Yeah.
pretty much is it goes back to all that hard work that
Yeah.
I was talking about earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Awesome, bro. Well, let the people know where they can find you, what you got going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess Insta's probably my main thing where I do all my wrestling stuff. So Connor010.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do have a YouTube channel, but don't really post much to it. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome, awesome. Well, everyone go check out Connor on his Instagram. Um, Follow him so you can see his updates, how he's developing wrestling in Australia, how he's developing MMA in Australia. Definitely one of the pioneers for sure. So it was awesome to have you on, bro. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much for having
And
me, man.
hopefully I'll come back to Melbourne soon and get
Yep,
to train with you
yep, sounds good.
again after
Thanks
10
very much.
years. All right, brother.
See you.
Um, so just before we finish recording and whatever, when you close the app, just leave the app open on your phone
Yep.
because then it'll download, right?
Okay, cool.
So once you leave, just leave the app opened.
Yep. Too easy, man.
All right, bro. Sweet. So
All good.
we'll finish up now. Thank you again.
No worries. Thanks very much, man.
Bye.